I started working when I was about 15 years old. And for the majority of the time, I've worked in male majority environments and male-run companies. And what I found is that mostly I felt pretty disempowered, not necessarily knowing how to find my voice. I bumped up against challenges being a female in male majority environments. Some are subtle and some are overt, but they come up, and I think that they come up for a lot of us despite our unique makeup. So gender bias and discrimination, exclusion, people having hidden agendas, getting dismissed, being objectified, being interrupted and talked over, experiencing sexual harassment. So one of the key moments in my career was working, I had just gotten a job, I was 26 years old, and I had just gotten a job for one of the most prominent sports agents in our country. And I was so excited about it because it was such a big deal, and it was with professional athletes, and it was a pretty flashy job. And so we decided that I would start working, and at the 3-month point, we would do a 3-month review, and we'd look to see, okay, is this a good fit? If it is a good fit, what will my salary be? So the 3-month meeting comes along, and I'm sitting there with the owner of the company, and he lets me know that he would love to have me on board, and that I think they had originally offered like $23,000 a year at that time, and that he said that one of the requests was that he would pay me $1,000 more a year if I slept with him while he traveled. My first thought was just $1,000, but for real, I was pretty horrified. And this man was very powerful and very intimidating, and I was really scared of saying no to him. Fortunately, I did say no, however, he couldn't obviously fire me as a result of saying no to his proposition. But I ended up leaving shortly after that because of the way I was being treated. Never talked to, not even looked at, not even acknowledged as a human being in this organization. So I left, and I've been on this journey of, okay, so how do I empower myself amidst these challenges without doing the thing that would perpetuate the system? For example, making the other person wrong. Like, how do I do this so I empower all of us to actually do something real together? And in my research, I found 3 common responses of how I would commonly respond to some of these challenges. The first one is that I would give up. This isn't going to change. Why bother? Nobody really cares. They don't care. So I don't speak up, and I just ignore it and do my thing and be on my merry way and go crochet at nighttime and just play small. By the way, nothing against crochet. Or I would agree with it. And some people might call this internalized depression, where it's like, okay, I must not be good enough if I'm bumping up against these challenges. I must only be worth my body and my sexuality or my attractiveness if I'm getting these offers. Or something must be wrong with me. Or men must be more intelligent. Or I can't be as successful as men are. So that's definitely happened in my system, and that's been a challenge that I continue to bump up against. And then the third one was get reactive. The other option that I found was make them wrong. I'm right, they're wrong, or something that I deserve better, I get defensive. But also that reactivity, maybe in a certain way I got hurt a little bit more, but it wasn't really creating lasting change for me. So I believe that these challenges of ours aren't necessarily going to go away anytime soon. However, the good news for me, and this is why I'm here with you today, is that in my experience, I have had the opportunity to find ways that actually address these things in ways that empower we, instead of just those three actions. So I want to share with you what some of those are. I said in the beginning a little bit that we work with companies, and essentially what we do is we take something called the collaborative way into organizations. The collaborative way is a called out way of, this is how we're going to work and relate together. So CEOs will come to us, they'll learn about the collaborative way, they'll say, we want to implement this in our company. So it's based on five core practices here. And it's kind of like, it's like rules of engagement. We're gonna request, and it's by volunteer, you can't make anybody do anything, but that everybody in our company goes by these rules of engagement. So we're gonna learn how to work this way together. This is in the we space. And it's all in the context of learning. We can never master these, so we call them practices. So we're always learning how to work together. And then also arises out of ethic of responsibility. So what's important about this to me is the more and more we take our own self-responsibility for our outcomes, the more empowered we become. So while I'm not going to talk about this in the context of a company, I want to talk about in the context of how this has impacted my own life and the challenges that we're talking about today. And as you'll see, as we get into some of these practices, they're pretty challenging practices. They're not comfortable. This isn't, even though it says collaborative way, this isn't a comfortable, harmonious way of relating. It's actually really challenging, difficult, and it's the most incredible method so far that I've found to navigate these things. First practice, it's called listening generously. Learning to listen for the contribution in each other's speaking versus listening from our assessments, opinions, and judgments. So in my experience, in my life, and also when I bump up against other people, I experience that we mostly tend to listen from how do I agree with what they're saying, or how do I disagree with what they're saying? How does that fit into my pictures? What do I think about what they're saying? Versus, wow, I really want to hear what is the contribution, what's the value in what they're attempting to share here, or what they are sharing here. And often that takes me getting out of my assessments to actually listen and get really curious and to put myself in their shoes, so in that certain way, so I can actually understand where are they coming from such they would be saying what they're saying. These practices go really deep. Like we actually do trainings. We do a three-day training where the first day is all about listening generously. So there's a lot of distinctions about listening generously, and they go really deep. But one of the things that I found most impactful in learning about listening generously is something that we talk about that's called listening filters. I have listening filters for myself, and I have listening filters for other people. So if I have a listening filter for myself that I'm disempowered, then I view the world from that lens of, wow, I feel disempowered. And so I'm looking for validation that, yeah, I am disempowered. I have a kind of filter of how I see myself in the world. And then I have filters about other people, about what color skin you have, about how you might remind me of somebody I knew 20 years ago, about what gender you are, about the way that you talk. And so right when I come up against or come across you, I already have filters that I'm listening through. And I can only really hear what gets through those filters. And yet, most of us tend to think that, you know, we're just relating to life as though it is the way it is. That I look at you and you have blonde hair, and I have a judgment, let's say I have a judgment about people with blonde hair. Maybe I should use brown hair to talk about myself. I have a judgment about people who use brown hair, and so as I'm listening to you, that's getting in the way of me actually listening to your contribution and your value. I'm listening through my assessment of your brown hair or your judgment or whatever the thing is. How this has really helped me in the challenges that I've come across is a lot of what I do when I go into companies is we take this training and we train them for a certain amount of time, for 3 days, and then we often do coaching sessions. So I'm usually coaching people at executive level or top key leadership levels. And generally I'm coaching, as a generalization, white middle-aged men who are 10 to 20 years older than myself. And so I'm walking in with filters, the coaching session, but they're also walking the filters about me. I'm supposed to be their coach. So I bump up against some filters, and some filters that, like for example, often I bump up against where I'm sharing something with the man in front of me, and he's either interrupting me, or it's very obvious he's not listening, or he's talking over me. And I'm just kind of, I start to get my filters start to kick up, like, oh, okay, here we go, another middle-aged white man who's not interested in listening to me. I get into my kind of at the effect role, victim role of, I'm not being listened to again, so here's my filter. Now, if I were to stay there, all that I hear is what only gets to that filter that validates why he's a jerk. The practice for me has been, okay, recognizing the filter, and usually I can recognize it because I have some sort of reactivity coming up. I'm like, okay, something's going on here, and I recognize, okay, I have this filter that he's not listening to me, he's not interested in listening to me. So the opportunity there is like setting it aside just enough so I can bring forward just a little bit more listening with like, really like, not listen to my filter, but what is this man saying by his speaking over me? What's actually going on here? And what's key in finding this is bringing authentic curiosity. So really being authentically curious about what is happening in that dynamic versus reacting to what I think is happening. So for example, I would then say something like, I don't know if you realize this. I notice you keep speaking before I finish what I'm saying. Are you interested in hearing the impact of this? But it's what's really key. So here I'm not only am I noticing my filter, but I'm centering myself. Okay, I'm not interested in feeling disempowered here. I'm not feeling like I want to disempower this other person. And then the next step, which we'll get to, is around the next practice is speaking straight. So this would be an example of speaking straight at that point. So without making him wrong, like just really curious, like help me understand. It seems like every time I start a sentence, you don't let me finish. I just want to check to see, like, are you intending to have that kind of impact? Because over here it doesn't feel very good. Or is there something happening for you that's making it hard to listen to what I'm saying? So what I found is by recognizing the filter, rather than reacting out of it again, I get really curious. And often, I might find that actually, okay, something is going on. Like, he's maybe not interested, maybe he's not interested in being there. You know, I did challenge one executive and said, sounds like, it doesn't really seem like you're wanting to be in this coaching session. Maybe you were forced to be in this coaching session. Help me understand what's going on for you right now. And then at that point, he got less defensive and was actually opened up and was actually really candid with me. Then we actually started relating. We weren't relating through our filters of each other. Yeah, so the first thing is awareness for me.
Okay.
And I actually do have a challenge for you here, which is filter challenge. So I challenge you just as you go throughout the day, maybe even right now, in this moment, you might have particular filters for who I am and how you're listening to me through those filters. But notice what comes up as you go to these other sessions, as you're listening to people. There's also positive filters too, which could be, wow, like she's the best and she knows exactly what she's talking about and I don't know what, like I'm just gonna, we find this a lot in work, like he knows the right thing to do, so I'm not gonna bring my intelligence forward. So there's different kinds of filters. So, but just notice, what are the filters that you're listening through? And then awareness, to me, is the first step. Just starting to become more self-aware of how you're relating to other people and how you're relating to the world. And I would say that if there's any point where you feel like at the effect of something, of someone or your circumstances, that's a really good indication that you probably have a pretty strong filter about someone or something that's happening. If you feel like, I can't do this, or this is impossible, or they're not going to let me, or this always happens, or something like that, where you feel the effect of your circumstances.
Would you say that filters would be similar to like unconscious biases that we have, or
Absolutely.
bias?
I would say that, absolutely. I would say unconscious biases, conscious biases, stories that we have about each other, judgments that we have about each other, assumptions that we make about each other, and then we operate from those biases, assumptions, judgments, stories, versus operate with probably reality in a particular way. So the filters thing, why I find it really hard is when I'm in these meetings with people that trigger me, or I'm in my story of being whatever victim I am, it takes me being really connected to what I stand for in order to actually do something different than the normal thing, which is really easy just to put it on them and blame them, and it's always going to be like this kind of a thing. So the more I'm in touch with my stand, the more it's not easier to set aside my filters, but the more I'm committed to doing that and to behaving in a different way.